Help keep Kinks and Beats Daily ad-free and receive bonus content early with a contribution of 20 cents per episode. Visit herohabit.com/shop for more information. Welcome to Kinks and Beats Daily. I'm your host, Tony Fry. This is episode 147. Before we get started today, I wanted to let you all know, in case you didn't know already, we have started a new Facebook group devoted to this podcast. We've taken down all the social stuff on herohabit.com in order to keep that site running smoothly and for the users there. And then we're starting a Facebook group. So you can go join over there, talk about episodes, talk about the bands with other like-minded fans from around the world. It's brand new. We've already got some conversations going, and I'd love to have you guys over there. So visit Hero Habit, facebook.com/Hero Habit, and in there you can find the group tab, or you can just search for Kinks and Beats Daily on Facebook and join the group. We'd love to have you there. Today, we are talking about the song Tell Me Why by the Beatles. This song, I think, is kind of a lost song for a lot of people, even though it appears in one of their movies, their first movie, Hard Day's Night, which Roger Ebert says is the Citizen Kane of rock and roll movies. It was released July 10th, 1964 on the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. And the only, quote, live performance of the song was for the film, even though it's lip sync, but it's the only time they performed it in front of an audience. But I guess they never really sang it live. It was recorded in 8 takes, the 8th being the one that was released on the album on February 27th, 1964. This session was also used to record And I Love Her, which they had redone several times, and had eventually did a couple takes of it on this date that they liked, and If I Fell, which all ended up on the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. So this was a very productive session for them, February 27th, 1964. And the song clocks in at just over 2 minutes. And despite that, it's got a lot of information in it that we'll get to in a little bit. It was released as a B-side to If I Fell, which was in Britain, but it was originally intended to be a British export. So they had no real... it was never officially a single in the UK, and has never been considered that. And although some people did sell it in the UK, it never charted, it never did anything like that. It was pressed to be sold, like in Italy, as a British export. So you can find vinyls of this song as the B-side to If I Fell, which is actually a really good 45 if you can get your hands on it. If I Fell backed with Tell Me Why. So it's a solid 45. But the reason that it never charted in the UK is simply because it was not intended to be an official release. This tune is a solid rocker. Takes a lot from the girl groups of the era that the band liked, and John admitted that he wanted it to sound like the New York. He said the New York girl groups of the 50s and 60s, and I think he achieves that mostly because of the chord progression he's using. I just dropped my guitar pick, so let me see if I can find that. There it is. He starts, and we've talked about this a few times, especially when we're talking about either the Kinks or the Beatles using like a 50s pastiche. He opens up with a 2-5 progression. And we're in the key of D, so that 2-5 is just E minor to A7. And then when it finally resolves, we're in the downbeat of the song. All right, so this is where it gets weird, because the song opens with this intro, this 2-5 intro, and it's basically all chorus. After the intro, it jumps right into a 2-phrase chorus. All right, so we've got the Tell Me Why You Cry and Why You Lie to Me. And why you lie So that's the chorus, right? Tell me why you cried and why you lied to me. And they say it twice, but that's basically the chorus. And it's just chord progression wise, it's a 1 chord to a 6 chord to a 2 chord to a 5 chord back to 1. And then it's got like a little turnaround, a 2/5 turnaround that they don't need to put in there, but it adds a little bit of flavor to the song, and it turns you around back to the D chord. And that's it. So that's the chorus. And one cool thing about it is that when you get out of the turnaround, the phrase ends on a D6 chord, which is still in the key of D. So that's not changing the key really. It's not a borrowed chord. But what Paul does is, for the most part, he's just going, he's sticking to, the chord structures, the chord tones. And here, where most guys would go D to A, he goes D to B over that D chord, which is the 6. And then that leads you into the turnaround. So it's kind of a cool little hook that Paul does by playing the 6th on the bass instead of the 5th, which would be the logical thing to do on the bass. That's where you're going to most likely go. So then the verse comes in after that. And the verse, we're going to say, well, I gave you everything I had, but you left me sitting on my own. That we're going to say is the verse because the lyrics are changing, but it's still it's the exact same chords as the chorus, but what they did was they omitted the 2/5 turnaround. So it's just going right. Well, I gave you everything I had, then you left me sitting on my own. Did you have to treat me oh so bad? All I do is hang my head and moan. So they just took out the 2/5 hook. All right, so there's that. And then we did still have an actual bridge. So even at 2 minutes, we've got choruses, we've got verses, and they've actually got a bridge. And when we get to the actual bridge, the song shifts to the 4 and then climbs to the 5, then to the 6, and then jumps back to 2, 5, 1. All right. And then also, so it sounds like a tonal shift. It sounds like we're changing keys, but we're really not. We've never strayed away from the key of D. And there's only one note in the entire song, chord-wise, that's not in the key of D, and it comes in this bridge. And it's this F natural. Well, I'm begging on my bended knee, if you only listen to my pleas. That F natural is the only borrowed chord in the entire song. So we're doing, well, I'm begging on my bended knee, if you'll only listen to my pleas. If there's anything I can do, 'cause I really can't stand it, I'm so in love with you. Tell me why. Then we're back to the chorus. So we never really drift away from the key of D. It's also kind of cool that is there anything I can do? That falsetto comes out of nowhere. They don't do it anywhere else, but it's there. And then the final chord uses a deceptive cadence. So deceptive cadence is when you have a 5/7 chord and then it resolves to anything but 1. Okay? In this case, it's resolving a 6 chord. And it changes the harmonic foundation because it should not end on a 6. But John and Paul sing the same notes as if they'd landed on the 1 chord. All right? So that's kind of cool. The band goes one place, but the vocals stay where you would think they would stay. And then they kind of backpedal by half steps to get back to home. So we're doing, tell me why you cry and why you lie to me. So here's the authentic cadence. A7 to D, tell you cry and why you lie to me. So here's the deceptive cadence. So the B minor has a lot of notes similar to a D chord. So that's why they can make um, uh, the vocal parts go to the same spot. And then they just backpedal back down to D. It's a cool little arrangement. There's a lot of harmonic hooks on this that I think help build that girl group sound that John was talking about. So despite it being a simple song over pretty standard changes that never fully modulates out of one home key, there are some little harmonic moments that add to that signature Beatles sound. George Martin is playing the left hand of a piano to add some rhythmic support. Throughout the whole thing, you hear this. You hear this. This down, up, down, up, down, up, and that supports this rhythmic. It's a rhythmic support that balances Paul's bass line, which is virtually all walking quarter notes. Bum bum ging gung 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 ging gung 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 gung. Right. Personally, I think the piano is way too high in the mix, and Martin doesn't always lock into the shuffle groove of the song. So even though it's a standalone note, you still have to swing that upbeat. You can't, and sometimes George Martin kind of hits it flat on the upbeat and doesn't do the shuffle. And you've got to be that subdivision of the triplet there to make this groove work. For the bridge, Martin drops out, and there is no piano backing. And I think the band sounds immediately tighter when there's no piano there. And listen to it, and listen to what the guitars are doing in connection to what Ringo's playing on the drums. And when that piano drops out during the bridge, the band sounds immediately tighter because those four guys know how to play a shuffle together, right? They're always locked in rhythmically. And I think the energy actually boosts up because you hear more of what the guitars are doing. And there's a lot of cool rhythm guitar stuff happening in this song that gets lost by that left-handed piano driving so high up in the mix. So that's Tell Me Why. It's a good tune. Hard Day's Night is so full of good songs. The album, and the movie, but the album's so full of good songs. It's the only album to exclusively feature Lennon and McCartney tracks. No covers, no Harrison songs. And I'm sure they thought of this as a throwaway, but it's such a good little rocker. And like I said, it's 2 minutes. But what would you add? This isn't really a song that screams for a guitar solo. Doesn't need another verse. Doesn't need any more chords. Like it's a perfectly constructed 2-minute song. And it served its purpose in the movie, and was probably something they threw together. They took 8 takes to do it, and John probably spent an hour writing it. So this was not something that they devoted a ton of time to, and yet it's a strong, up-tempo, early Beatles track that hits a lot of the notes that we like for early Beatles recordings. So Tell Me Why. You can, like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, join our Facebook group, which I think has an easy, if you go to herohabit.com, under the podcast button, there's a link to get to this Facebook group, but I think it's something like facebook.com/groups/kinksandbeats or something like that. It's very easy to find. You can also still reach me, kinksandbeats@herohabit.com for email, or call me 925-494-1739. I am saving your voicemails for bonus material that we will release every so often. And for contributors, I know that our schedule has been a little bit wonky lately. It looks like everything's back to normal. We'll be getting on a regular release schedule now. But for subscribers, as a thank you, you're actually going to get an exclusive bonus episode that is not ever going to be released on the normal feed. And that's going to be devoted to George Harrison's signature sound. We're going to do an analysis of his signature sound as a songwriter and as a producer. And that's going to go to contributors that will never get released to the general public. So keep that in mind as a thank you for helping us keep the lights on and keeping this podcast running. All right, I will talk to you guys soon. Remember to swing by iTunes and give us a 5-star rating and review, and tell all your friends to listen. All right, thank you so much. This podcast is presented by the Hero Habit Podcast Network. Swing by HeroHabit.com today to comment on this episode and poke around our growing database of sports and pop culture news, reviews, and collectibles. HeroHabit.com. Collect your heroes.